Just let everybody enter. Then I will begin. The school board business, excuse me, school board business meeting for the Edmonds School District for August 25th, 2020 is called to order. Please, we will now have the flag salute. And we'll have a flag shortly, perhaps. Or maybe not.
Just a moment, Deborah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And next, Dr. Balderas, will you administer the land acknowledgement?
Yes, thank you. We respectfully acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish tribes. Thank you.
And next we have the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve.
I second it. It's Nancy.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. I would like to submit a proposal to for an amendment to the agenda to move my board comments, just mine, up to just after the public comments so that I can respond on behalf of the board and ask some clarifying questions. Do I hear a motion?
I move to
Ann.
accept your amendment.
This is Ann, seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to accept my amendment to move my comments up to just after the public comments. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of amending the agenda as discussed, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes. And now we are at the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion as amended, the agenda as amended?
I move to adopt the agenda as amended.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll move for a vote. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended for tonight, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes. Okay. Next, we move on to the public comments. And before we get started, I believe that we had about 450 public comments tonight as of just prior to this meeting, and perhaps there are some more coming in on the issue of the bargain between the district and EEA, Edmonds Education Association. There is not enough time for us to read all those comments. So we will be reading a small portion of them tonight. But the vast majority of them are on this same issue. And the entire document with all the public comments will be attached to the minutes for tonight for the public to read. The board has already dug into those comments and will continue to review those comments in the coming week. So I thought I had them. Oh yes, I do have them. So I will begin, and we pretty much just chose some from the top. The first comment comes from Riley Gallagher on Continuous Learning 2.0. I am concerned that the district team has not been able to come to an agreement through bargaining with EEA. I have concerns about the extreme amount of time it will take to plan and provide effective remote learning for my students. In the spring, I put many, many hours into communicating with families, planning lessons, and implementing them via Zoom with students who come to me for learning support and Title I reading services. Communicating with each of my students' families regularly, arranging times to meet, supporting them in their general education work, planning individualized lessons, and finally implementing the lessons took an immense amount of time and effort. In order to build upon and improve the program I implemented last year, I know even more time and effort will be required of me this fall. The next comment comes from Jenica Valdivia. I hope I said that correctly. And this is also on Continuous Learning 2.0. This will be my 18th year teaching. I spent countless hours last spring planning, preparing, and connecting with students and families as we navigated remote learning. My family and personal life were put on the back burner as I worked long hours late into the evening. As we head into this new school year, I cannot do that again. We must be given time to plan and connect with our students and colleagues in order to be successful in our jobs. The next comment comes from Tyra Rink on the same subject, contract time for teachers. I encourage the board and district bargaining team to continue to come to the table and understand the needs of our families and teachers. Across social media, parents are asking for time and flexibility to provide learning opportunities for their students. My families have asked me if the schedule will be similar to last year, recorded lessons that they could watch when it was convenient for them, with opportunities for questions, feedback, and community building via Zoom lesson meetings. Our focus in the spring was literacy and math. Even with the OSPI guidelines for time, I was spending 8 to 10 hours a day creating lessons, connecting with families, holding multiple Zoom meetings, and providing feedback for just those two subject areas. If we are to provide both synchronous and asynchronous opportunities, the time has to be there to plan, record, render, and upload. Several parents in my neighborhood have also expressed concern over screen time and have mentioned that the different recommendations for daily time in front of their screens from their pediatricians. Students need to learn. Of that, there is no argument, but going from the model of do what you can, when you can, if you can, to be online at this time or else does not match with the district's equity focus. I know based on the experience in the spring that I can optimistically expect 70% of my students to log in at a designated time. It was about 25 to 40% any given day last spring. If we have a third of our students not attending live instruction, what option do we have to catch them up? I encourage the district and board to trust their highly qualified teachers to know and provide the best instruction that will meet the needs of our students and families. Edmonds is a diverse district, and a one size fits all schedule does not honor that. Thank you. This next one comes from Kelly Hayes. More time for teachers. My name is Kelly Hayes, and I have been teaching science at Edmonds Woodway High School for about 28 years. I just want you to know that we are all going to need significant time to adapt our materials. In science, we are going to be writing dry labs to give students data to work with in place of real lab work. Most of us give exams on paper, and we are having to think of more creative ways to assess them where they cannot just talk to a friend on the phone to get answers or look up information on Google. I rewrote my beginning of the year student survey to get more information from students so I can individualize my instruction more going online, and it took me an hour. This was just a student survey. Please give us the time we need to do our jobs well. The next one comes from Sally Dialt. Hi, my name is Sally Dialt, and I am a teacher at Lindale Elementary School. I would like to help you understand how much time it takes to plan in an online format. I am a teacher with 16 years experience. Last spring, we jumped to online teaching with no training and little resources. I spent 12-hour days, including working evenings, planning my lessons and teaching them on Zoom, posting to Google Classroom, trying to learn the best platform for my students, to use, and adapting great lessons to online teaching. This fall is going to be just as hard, if not harder. I've seen the schedule the district has laid out. To do that, I won't be checking on my own children. I'll be spending every waking moment either on Zoom, or I assume this is making lessons for Zoom. The lessons I taught last spring can't be retaught. They were for the spring. We need to learn a new platform, more time, new curriculum. Some of us have changed grade levels due last year's, I'm not sure how, something's missing, but in classroom lessons, last year's classroom lessons don't apply. There is so much to learn, plan, and create. When do we sleep, eat, relax? Please consider your teachers and students and really think about what is best. Thank you. And now I will pass the baton to Anne.
Sure, I'll pick it up. This next one is Trinity Marywood. It's time for prep for remote learning start. Even though we have Edgenuity as a platform, I teach an average of 15 different sections at any given time of the school year. In order to add enriching activities or ensure proper contact with students occurs, we need the 4 prep days we usually get. We also need the flexibility we have been using in order to remain equitable. Our student population isn't experiencing the same situation in a vacuum. Some are working more to support list family income. Some are trying to fight mental issues. Some are battling so many things, and making it harder for us to do our job isn't going to make it better. Time is critical. The next is Celeste. It looks like Yeasley or Yeasley, and it's entitled Contact with EEA. I'm concerned about the time it will take to plan adequately next school year. I have been lucky enough to spend hours planning with a 3-school Algebra 1 team this summer to get ready for online learning. There are 13 of us, unpaid, and without materials that are up to date or with any online tools. Even with the work split between us and working all summer, we haven't been able to get a quarter planned. Due to the time planning took during last year, we took on the task of planning without district direction simply because had so little time to interact with students and create meaningful material. We are very well aware of the importance of Algebra 1 for high school graduation and are incredibly concerned that if we don't create good material for our students, our students will have a hard time getting to graduation. Please, please take into consideration that teachers in the Edmonds district are hardworking, student-focused teachers who need more time than normal to learn an entirely new way to teach. We desperately want to do right by our kids, and we haven't been given the time to learn all the tools, much less create material, especially in high school math, which had incredibly outdated materials for 21st century learners. We are a district focused on equity and breaking the achievement gap, and the teachers need planning time to learn and create materials that can do such. Thank you for your time. The next is Lindsay Schultz, Time and Continuous Learning 2.0. I am a teacher at Briar Terrace Middle School, and I wanted to make my voice heard regarding the time needed to execute Continuous Learning 2.0 in a few weeks. Last week, I attended a wonderful keynote given by Jeff Utrecht about effective online teaching. According to him, one of the most powerful teaching tools is pre-recorded instructional videos that students can view on their own time and at their own pace. I want to be sure that I have the time that I need to create these videos and find other ways of connecting to my students. Mr. Utrecht, who was invited to speak by the district, provided many useful ideas and tools to help teachers make the most of this difficult situation, but many of them are very time consuming. I am more than willing to put in the work, but fear that the district will not give me the time to do so. I implore the district to consider the gargantuan task that is being asked of teachers and to respect us as professionals. Please give us the time we need to be the most effective teachers we can be. The next one is from Lori Schmidt. She said, I teach in the deaf and hard of hearing program in the district and don't understand why we are not being given more time for planning. I spend 90 to 120 minutes just communicating with families. One family in my student population has access to email. All other information I am sending home via text message. 2 families require written Spanish, and this is only parent communication time commitment. This does not include the extra time required to prepare for the 3 to 4 different academic levels my students represent. All of my students have a language delay between 2 to 5 years. My workload tripled last year, trying to meet the needs of my unique student needs. I'm working with 3 different languages on a daily basis. The proposed schedule will not cut it. Please allow for more planning time. Thank you. And the last one of mine is Nazia Hunejo. Last spring, I spent majority of my workday reaching out to family, students, and PLC, which left me working well beyond my 8-hour workday. Come fall, I need more allotted time to plan and provide effective synchronous and asynchronous learning for my students. I need time within my work week to communicate with students, families, and PLC. I need this in order to instruct my students in a meaningful Washington standard-based lessons that are synchronous to support learning growth to prepare them for next level of academic. Please help. I desperately need this to continue to balance my mental health, effective teaching, and support emotional student health. Thank you.
Why don't we go to Nancy now? Director Kadams.
Okay, unmuting is good. So my first comment is from Suzanne Rizzotti, and the topic is time involved with planning for remote instruction. And Suzanne says, I have been working remotely since the schools closed in March. I worked twice as many hours per week with less instructional time just to provide consistency and assignments in reading, math, and writing. I have been taking webinars to improve my skills, and I have learned a lot. However, the time it takes to create short instructional videos is in every subject has not been calculated yet. I only know it is going to require more time than I spent in the spring. Please consider the time, the stress, and the impact this has on my family when you think about negotiating with the EEA. Thank you. And the next is from Jessica Valdivia. The topic is teachers need time to successfully implement continuous learning 2.0. This will be my 18th year teaching. I spent countless hours last spring planning, preparing, and connecting with students and families as we navigated remote learning. My family and personal life were put on the back burner as I worked long hours late into the evening. As we head into this new school year, I cannot do that again. We must be given time to plan and connect with our students and colleagues in order to be successful in our jobs. And my next one is from Mary Pearson. The topic is time. And she says, I teach special education and 7 different classes at the secondary, middle school, and elementary levels. Using virtual learning took me an average of 2 to 1 in terms of planning time to online instruction. For each hour of instruction, it took at least 2 hours to prepare adequately for the wide range of students I serve. Multiply this by the different classes I teach, and you get an idea of how much time it involved. It is also imperative that we have time in between classes. 10 minutes just doesn't cut it for setting up and taking down each subject area prior to the Zoom sessions. Parents have also complained that 10 minutes in between class means that students do not have enough time to gather materials and re-sign in for the next class. The schedule is critically important, and it would be nice if teachers who actually teach were involved in the decision-making. The next is Catherine Amason. I hope I'm saying that right. The topic is contract for certified teachers. And she says, I would like to have the district sign with EEA to get our contract settled so we can start to place classes, plan for online learning, and do all the numerous things we need to do to start our school year. Online learning last spring was very time consuming, and to improve on it this year, as well as to consider in-person learning later on, we will need time to plan, get coordinated with parents, etc. I had planned several Zoom meetings last year, and at least 1/3 of the time, I would have to reschedule the meeting due to parent/family conflicts. Please reach an agreement so we can get to teaching. Thank you. My next comment is from Sarah Thompson. The topic is EEA bargaining. And Sarah says teachers need time to prepare effective and sufficient instruction for all students. Both synchronous and asynchronous instruction is needed, which requires more preparation than ever before. Also, our families need much more communication and checking in than ever before, which also requires time to do well. This is not an extravagant request. We simply want to be able to do our jobs well for the good of our students in this time of crisis. And I turn it over to the next person.
Okay, go ahead, Director Noble, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. The next one is from Chloe Giro. As we move into the new school year, teachers are going to be desperate in need of adequate planning time. During the spring, we scrambled and threw things together to make teaching work as best we could. It didn't work well. Personally, I had about 1/3 of the students stay engaged through the final month of school. This was similar to many other teachers I spoke with. We will be getting new students we don't know and who don't know us. We'll have a very limited personal connections with them, which will make teaching all the much harder. If the many students that we got to know last year didn't want to learn remotely, how are we supposed to keep the ones we don't know motivated to learn? We need the time to plan ways to connect with them beyond pushing out assignments. We now know we need time to prepare if we want all students to have a chance of being successful learning remotely. We need time to figure out how to reach students, create lessons that are engaging, learn new methods of remote teaching technology, work with our PLCs, as well as communicate with students and their families. We're going to have to take all the things we would do within a class period and try to translate that digitally, which on the surface seems impossible. Speaking as a 7th grade teacher, I know my students will be coming this year completely lost. They have to navigate 6 classes without their teachers and peers around them to help. I'm worried for them if teachers aren't given enough time to create ways to help them through this transition. Next one is from Susan Rao. I'm an Edmonds elementary teacher. Research shows that students learn new concepts best teacher-created videos. Last spring, I made over 50 videos for my student core subjects. This involves learning a new reading curriculum as well as converting known ones into effective online instruction. Just this task involved my work week as well as weekends. This is not to mention the other essential tasks I must continue, including all the communications with students, parents, and colleagues. I hope you'll give us adequate time to give students the quality instruction they need and deserve. Next one is from Kathy Daly. As a 34-year veteran teacher, I begin my 35th year with a feeling of uncertainty like I've never experienced. Hearing that we may not be given adequate time to do this job of remote teaching makes me feel sick to my stomach. Last spring, I spent countless hours planning with my team over Zoom, filming asynchronous lessons for each week, meeting with my students in large and small groups remotely, and answering countless parent emails and calls about an endless number of topics. All this time spent was in order to give my first graders 30 to 60 minutes of teaching work per day. At times, I felt completely overwhelmed and broke down in tears, knowing that we will need to provide a full day's worth of synchronous teaching, asynchronous lessons, independent work, SEL support, as well as feedback and grades and support for our families that are juggling all this feels like an overwhelming task. Please understand the need for additional planning time for teachers this year. In the classroom, I am a distinguished teacher. Remotely, I am a basic first-year teacher at best. I can improve, but only if given the time and resources needed to do this work. The next one is from Teresa Estes. Hello, my name is Teresa Estes, and I'm an elementary music teacher in the district. Like my teaching colleagues, I have been increasing my skills and knowledge this summer in preparation for the coming school year. In doing so, I've been reminded how critical my connection with my students and parents will be. Communicating expectations, answering questions, and providing feedback on assignments will take a significant amount of time outside of synchronous learning sessions. Gathering materials and recording lessons for at-home learning will also take additional time. The amount of time needed to prepare and connect for continuous learning is far above what a teacher needs for normal in-person class sessions. I cannot emphasize enough. I want my students to learn and engage with music on a both personal and content-based level. I want parents to notice the difference in my interaction and contact makes in their child's life. Please give me and my colleagues the preparation time to achieve these positive outcomes. Thank you. And my last one is from Shannon Gonsalves. Last spring, we did the hardest thing in my 24 years that I've taught and went remote. I worked daily from morning until 8 to 9 p.m. with little relief. I worked weekends and even held parent meetings since so many parents were still working. I spent $400 of my own funds to create a space to teach from at home. It was incredibly difficult, and this year sounds even harder. Understandably so, this year we'll have more contact time with students and more accountability. It will be even more work than the spring to completely revamp my entire curriculum to that one that is online. To differentiate for students last year, I pulled small groups and provided one-to-one instruction with extra adult listening, This meant that curriculum planning and providing feedback to students happened after contract hours. I was easily working 60 to 70 hours per 70-hour work weeks. I knew I could do it short term. I can't do it this year again, knowing that it could be all year. We need more time to plan. Neighboring districts are providing additional planning time for teachers. I need extra planning time to create an effective program for all of my learners. It was appalling to me that our district leaders felt that we didn't need additional time to plan. Be flexible and get back to the bargaining table with an open mind and to planning time for teachers.
And last but not least, Director Chase, would you like to carry on?
Thank you, Dr. Kilgore. I will start the comments number 22 with Rebecca Bergesser, and the topic is planning time for teachers. As a teacher who has taught both in person and completely online, I can attest that in order to be effective, online curriculum takes a lot of planning, particularly for teachers who are accustomed to delivering content in person. I have seen estimates that state that for each minute of asynchronous video instruction, a teacher spends 10 minutes planning. That means a 30-minute asynchronous video could take a teacher upwards of 5 hours to prepare. K-12 teachers are tasked with teaching many different subjects and classes. There's no way we can effectively teach without enough planning time. In the spring, teachers were already burned out. I've worked with a small team of high school English teachers for the past 3 years to create a literature of social justice course. In the spring, my colleagues told me they were spending entire days creating videos for their students. They looked exhausted and weary. Not only does planning take time, we also need time to give effective feedback, communicate with students and families, and work to support students who are experiencing trauma, homelessness, and other critical needs. Teachers are working harder than ever. The Edmonds School District needs to recognize that although learning looks different right now, it is no easier for teachers. In fact, for many, it is much harder. We have a lot of veteran teachers in ESD. Imagine doing something one way for 20+ years and suddenly being asked to flip it 180 degrees. Just as we are giving grace to students, teachers too need grace and time. Time to get things right, time to practice, time to learn, time to make their classes the most effective and equitable they can. Next we have, I think I skipped one. There we go. Alicia Dion Guerrera. And the agenda topic is EEA agreement. Hello, I teach 6th at Spruce Elementary. This is my 20th year of teaching and my 5th year of 6th grade. Last spring, I taught writing to 90 of the 6th graders. I easily worked more than 50 to 60 hours a week. This is much more than I do in a regular school year. I spent my time writing family connection letters to make sure families stayed informed, wrote individual emails to families and students as I was concerned about who needed help, answered many family emails asking for help with academics, tech issues, or food concerns. I spent large amounts of time planning and creating lessons for writing. This was different than other years because it was digital. I created Google Slides to go over while I recorded myself teaching. Then I created Google Forms to check their understanding. Finally, I created assignments for them to complete the work. Students were able to watch the videos at their leisure and then contact me for questions. I met with students and a parent via both Zoom and Google Voice. The rest of my time I spent analyzing the Google Form check-ins and grading the writing assignments. When grading the writing assignments, I gave meaningful feedback on each and every assignment and student. I am proud to say that students who did the work I assigned learned almost as much as if they had been with me in person. That said, I was burning out very quickly. I spent almost no time with my family. I ate dinners in front of the computer. I purchased an additional monitor so I didn't strain my eyes so much. My kids told me they missed me. The thought of doing that again this fall severely stresses me out for both my mental health and for my children's. I'm committed to stopping work by 5 p.m. Each night this year. That will likely mean that my lessons won't be as well prepared or that I might not be able to offer as much help needed to students, but I need to have some downtime for my family. Please help to make sure teachers have the time they need to prepare lessons, administer them, help students, and communicate with families. Thank you. And next is Julian Barnes. And the agenda item topic is Teachers Need Time for CL 2.0. I'm writing to urge the school board to direct the district to continue bargaining with the EEA in order to achieve an agreement that will lead to high quality remote learning for our students. As a teacher at an Edmonds school, I can assure you that it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to successfully teach in this format. Last spring, I spent countless hours planning, preparing lessons, communicating with families, and more. I believe I spent more time working during continuous learning than in our usual format. That is what it takes to be excellent. And that is what it takes our students, and that is what our students deserve. I implore you to get an agreement with teachers in place so we can get to the work we need to do to make CL 2.0 successful for all of our students. Thank you. Next is from Tracy Case, and the topic is tentative agreement. How do we not yet have a tentative agreement? I love serving my students from Cedar Way Elementary. My second grade teaching partners and I worked tirelessly for no less than 50 to 60 hours a week last spring, delivering content, hosting Zoom meetings for our whole class, and multiple small group meetings for reading, writing, and math support. Do you know how much time it takes to record lessons? We do. It took us hours because no one was available to teach us how to do it. We learned a lot through trial and error. Creating content and collaborating as a grade level team is how we spent the time during grab and go lunch times when we could not meet with our students, and our late afternoons and evenings. We also offered social emotional groups via Zoom. We did virtual field trips on Fridays along with lessons and SEL lessons during our second step curriculum. We sought ways to get Seesaw Premium and used Clever to reduce the clicks for our families. We had sessions one-on-one with families to check in and provide resources for them. We worked tirelessly, often until midnight, Sunday evenings through Friday evenings, every week. We also spent hundreds of dollars of our own money on lighting, tripods, and other technology to get the job done at home without complaining. Now here we are ready to work again, and we're being held back because you cannot agree on time. Please trust those of us who proved ourselves. I heard from friends about their children receiving inconsistent lessons or guidance. I understand the need for consistency. Go to those people to see what they need to be successful, as you would have us do with our students and families. How will holding us back help this? Go to the source of the problem. Last week, we had an outstanding presentation by Jeff Utech. In that very chat, there were people being negative and questioning. See what they need. They have to differentiate every day for our students. You can do this for us too. The delay of resources is unbelievable. We need Seesaw up and running. We need the teachers' college videos last week. I've been taking classes for the last 2 years to be better prepared to serve our families and students. I am pleading with you. What is going on? And I believe that is the last one that is highlighted for tonight.
Thank you. And as just to reiterate, these are not the entire set of public comments. The document will be attached to the minutes, and the board will continue to look at these comments as they've come in through the day, and the public may also view them. And as I mentioned before, the vast majority of the comments were on this topic tonight. Next, I would like to respond to the extent that we're able. And I would like to respond on behalf of the board. You know, first, the school board is united in our commitment to students. We deeply appreciate the dedication our hardworking teachers and staff have to our students. At the end of the day, we all know that besides the family, and sometimes in place of family, the teacher has the most important role to play in a child's educational experience. It is the board's job to ratify contracts, not negotiate them. We have hired a new superintendent whom we respect and trust to weigh and balance multiple interests and needs, always to the benefit of our students. It's inappropriate for us as the board to comment on ongoing negotiations. However, we do have some clarifying questions we'd like to ask at this time. As president, I'm going to ask the questions on behalf of the board, as we're committed to maintaining a fair bargaining process, and we don't want our conversation to stray into territory about the bargaining process. So, and these questions, they may sort of circle back because I know that we are getting a report on our reopening plan later in the evening in our agenda. But I'd like to ask them now. They emerged from the various emails and public comments that we've had an opportunity to review. First, I'd like to ask on behalf of the board, who was involved in developing the draft schedules for the district and what process was used to get to these draft schedules?
Hi there, I get to field that one. So our process for planning for reopening began in the spring. And we pulled together a team that was an extension of our Professional Excellence Committee, that's our PEC committee, that we called our Continuous Learning Task Force. And so this had teacher representatives from all levels, administrators, those are principals on that team, as well as me, and also union leadership. So our EEA president, Andy Knopfsiger Meadows, and our UNICEF rep are on those committees. So that really served as our steering committee that moved forward a lot of this work. The key details in the proposed schedules were drafted through recommendation process with, we called our job-alike work groups. And so we had great participation from teachers in our district to join these job-alike work groups. Just as an example, one of those work groups was our high school and middle school CTE teachers. A handful of those teachers came together working under the leadership of Mark Madison to make recommendations for their programming. Another group may have been, well, was our elementary education team. So led by Joanne Todd, our Director of Elementary Ed, a group of elementary teachers and administrators working together to make recommendations. Those teams made recommendations back to the Continuous Learning Task Force. And from those, our goal was to get a time schedule proposal ready to pass off to bargaining. And again, that was a process that included about 37 people and a handful of administrators, good cross-section of teachers from all levels. So elementary was represented, some special programs, counselors were represented, high school teachers, and again, we also had our union leadership on there. And we're also represented by Dr. Kadams, who served as a rep for the school board. So, and so those time recommendations were then passed off to the bargaining team at that point. And then they've been worked on in bargaining.
Okay, and you did mention that the participants were drawn from all levels. Would you say that the participants would represent those who serve the diverse array of students that we have in our district?
I would say so. The job-alike work groups, I actually am putting together an acknowledgements page for our reopening plan. And there are over 150 individuals on that list, and they represent a variety of schools, variety of levels, variety of different backgrounds, specialties. I think it represents a very well. I think it represents the diversity among our staff very well.
Thank you. Next, how much non-student contact time is part of the draft schedule for the upcoming year compared with the pre-COVID-19 contract?
I'll respond to that with the caveat that this can vary from teacher to teacher and student to student, depending on their role in the organization. But pre-COVID, there was about, on an average of 700 minutes a week at the elementary In the schedules that Dr. Baumgartner was referring to, it's about probably an average of 860, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then Wednesday was structured where the bulk of the work, again, that can vary depending on services that certain students may receive, is around about 350 minutes. At the secondary level, that non-contact was about 650 minutes a week. In the schedules that were drafted for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, it's about 720 minutes on an average, and then again about 350 minutes on a Wednesday. So again, those are draft schedules, but those do represent a fairly accurate average.
So just to clarify, we're talking about 860 minutes plus 350 at the elementary level for non-student contact time. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
and some of that there could be, you know, again, some services provided during that time.
Okay. How will Wednesday be spent in the life of a teacher using these schedules? And I realize it may vary by level. How much of Wednesday time is at the discretion of the teacher? That would be the second part of that question.
I can respond to that one. So from the beginning, when we began talking about reopening, whether it was in the hybrid model or whether it was in a full remote model, we recognized the need for significant chunks of time for teacher planning. And you'll recall that in our hybrid schedules that we put out to the public early in the summer, those included Wednesdays would be full remote days for all students. It's hard to generalize this as an every single Wednesday situation, because as you might also recall, what we proposed in our draft calendar is that all of our non-student days, which traditionally had been on a Friday, and our early release days are scheduled on Wednesdays as well. So what I'll say is not true for every single Wednesday, but most of them, if they are a regular Wednesday or an early release Wednesday. Essentially, the way that the day is proposed in the drafts is that the morning would be time for teachers plan and prep. But you know, it's important to know that the you know, we have a plan, at least at my department, because that's individually directed time. We could offer professional development that teachers could opt into as well. So, but in sum, it really looks like the morning of the teacher workday on Wednesdays would be designated for, we call it individually directed time. And then the afternoons are for office hours and some small group meetings. And that's true for both elementary and secondary. Yeah, the calculation now, it's roughly from the start of the workday through the lunch hour.
Okay.
Oh, and
Yeah.
I'm Rob Baumgartner. I'm the Executive Director of Student Learning.
Yes, we've been asked by people who are calling in to say our names. So this is Deborah Kilgore. And let's see. Do the draft schedules seem comparable to those of other districts in the region? We've heard from some people and teachers that other districts have given more non-student contact time to their teachers.
Hi, everybody. This is Greg Schwab, Assistant Superintendent, and I'm happy to try to speak to that question a little bit. So in comparing our schedules to the draft schedules that have been released by other districts, I think there are a couple of things that really stand out. One is, I think we always like to look at Everett because they're our neighbor just to the north, and looking at the amount of for example, synchronous or time that the students were spending in live learning with their teachers online. And so, Edmonds, we're asking teachers at elementary, for example, to spend about 3 hours and 45 minutes. In Everett, they're asking their teachers to spend about 4 hours and 45 minutes. And at the secondary level, we're asking our teachers to spend about 3 hours and 15 minutes. And in Everett, they're asking their teachers to spend about 5 hours and 5 minutes. So there's a lot more time spent in other schedules with students engaged in live synchronous activities with their teachers. And then the same thing with planning time. I think that some of the non-student time that you see, again, the way that we place our time before and after school compared to other districts, we seem to put a lot more time before school and with about 2 hours of time that is not in front of students for teachers. And then Wednesdays, as I think we've already covered, we provided our teachers with a significant chunk of time on Wednesdays. Other districts like Shoreline and Everett and North Shore are also giving their teachers some time on Wednesdays, but I think it's fairly comparable. So I think on average, it's safe to say that we're providing probably a little bit more planning time to our teachers than our surrounding districts.
Thank you. And what flexibility is there for teachers in the draft schedules? And also speak to flexibility for parents, because those have also come up in some of the emails. Is there any flexibility?
This is Rob. I can take that one. So one of the kind of difficulties in putting this together was trying to find sort of the right balance between scheduled time that we could publish and people knew was going to be consistent day to day, week to week, and providing that amount of flexibility that we know is important in this environment. We heard from families that they wanted flexibility, but we also heard that there was perhaps too much flexibility in what we offered in the spring. And so that was one of the things that we were trying to work towards. So in our draft schedules, the way that they're set up at elementary is there is a designated synchronous time followed by, and just to define that better, we're saying synchronous is a live online video conference lesson. And then that would be followed by a small group time, which would also be synchronous, live, in-person time with the teacher. And then that would be followed by a chunk of time that would be for a variety of asynchronous or independent work activities. And roughly that would be repeated in the afternoon. The flexibility for teachers really comes in how they utilize that synchronous time. We don't want there to be this expectation that our teachers are having to have kids synchronous in whole group for that whole designated time. There's flexibility in how teachers would use that. It might be very appropriate to start off with a whole group class meeting to start the day, but then there's flexibility in how the rest of that synchronous time might be utilized. You might only keep some of your class. You might share a resource with them, set them to work, and then go into small group work a little bit early. So there is flexibility in how that's administered, but there is a fair amount of structure. When it comes to how our students would engage, there's flexibility, but again, we also have to have some level of expectation. And so the way that we're approaching flexibility with our families and students is we really do want them to join the synchronous in-person learning. If we do that well, that's going to be the opportunity for students to connect with their teacher and to connect with one another, and really that opportunity for us to, we're calling it, building a sense of belonging in a virtual environment. Then, if a student is invited to a small group, we would expect them to be able to come to the small group instruction. And I imagine the teachers will work with families to make sure that that works for schedules. Where the flexibility comes in how the students approach the rest of the learning in their day. So I can, think of a recent example, was talking with the teacher about just this week following the Jeff UTECT training, but was sharing some work that she did with our science TOSA, and the work was around developing a lesson that used the video resource, and then there was a specific task for the student to do. And what she remarked on was that when she checked back in with her students, they did that assignment all over the map, some on the weekend, some in the evening, you know, some did it first thing when they got up in the morning. And that's where the flexibility will really come for students and families. The other piece of flexibility is we do have an expectation, and this is true at all levels, that if a student's unable to make it for the synchronous in-person learning, that the teacher will provide a way for the student to access that learning. So it could be a variety of things. It could be perhaps, if it's appropriate, recording the Zoom lesson and making that available to that student and their family. It could also be as simple as sharing the slide deck and the annotated notes. There is an expectation, though, that if students weren't able to make it, but we don't want to set it up in a way that it's absolutely okay to never come to the in-person learning, right? We don't want it to be something that you don't have to participate and engage, because we're expected to take attendance. So, so there are definitely ways that we're trying to, I think that we're getting closer to that balance between structure with a fair amount of flexibility for our students and perhaps to a lesser degree for our teachers.
Thank you. Okay, and when we talk about the work teachers do in staff meetings with their principals or in district or building directed professional development, what exactly is in the pre-COVID-19 contract now? How many hours do teachers spend in staff meetings and in district directed PD?
This is Debbie Carter. I'll respond to that. In the 1920 school year, we had 7 non-student days, of which there was professional learning provided. How we look at that is we designate that in half-day chunks. So it would be 14 half-days. 8 of those are teacher-directed this year, and 6 were district and or building directed. We also in 1920 had 11 early release days, and of those 7 are teacher directed and 4 are district building directed. For 1920, the one difference is that we have an additional day that the state is paying for, so it will be 8 non-student days. Currently, there are 2 Wednesdays a month that are designated for administrator-directed time. The other 2 Wednesdays are directed by the work of the teacher, as are the other 4 days of the week.
So I'm sorry, I missed the number of days, the full release days that the district directs.
In 1920, there were 6 half days, and 8 half days are directed by teachers.
Okay, so 6 half days directed by the district.
Yes.
And that's it. Okay, and those would, in the upcoming school year, would happen on the Wednesday?
Yes.
6
they
times throughout the year?
Yes.
Okay, and then, so in total, it's 6 Wednesdays throughout the year, district directed PD on the Wednesday, and then 2 Wednesdays per month for how much time is administrator directed time?
It's an hour each.
Each,
Each
so
day.
2 hours total per month. Okay,
And then the other piece was the 11 early release that Dr. Baumgartner said those have been on Fridays and under the draft schedule would move to Wednesdays. And 4 of those are directed by the district building and 7 are directed by the teachers.
okay, so that adds up to then 10 half-days directed by the district, or 10, okay, throughout the year on Wednesdays.
Yes.
Okay. And then, okay. That concludes the clarifying questions that the board had based on our review of the feedback that we've been getting. Thank you for responding, and I know we'll have even more details later in the agenda. So next we have the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
There's no Gary Noble. I move to approve.
Ann McMurray, second.
It's been moved and seconded. This is Deborah, to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a vote, a roll call vote. Allison?
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye. And the motion passes. The consent agenda is approved. Next, we have our reports, beginning with the report on the reopening plan for 2020. Take it away.
Thank you. I think what we want to do is really just describe the process, the template that we need to submit to OSPI here very soon, and answer board's questions, but also just provide a quick update in terms of what the work that we've been doing regarding some aspects to the reopening plan, including childcare and some other efforts from the operations side. So I kind of want to give an opportunity for staff to kind of weigh in here to be able to express some of the efforts that have been moved forward. And also, we've had a pretty strong communication effort with community meetings. We have some lined up this week. We have a few lined up next week as well that are really targeted. And those have been well received as with the community, and want to just make sure that folks understand what we are doing and how we're going to continue those. So if I could maybe have Dr. Young maybe speak a little bit to childcare and some other aspects.
Thank you, Dr. Valderas. I do have a few updates from our last community forum that we've had, and our community members asked some amazing questions that will help us prepare for the next one that's coming up on August 31st from 6 to 7 p.m. by the way. We're going to have our district staff as well as the 4 childcare providers and their representatives directly answering questions from our families. So I'm really looking forward to that. But here's a few updates concerning breakfast and lunch service. A lot of our families wanted to know what was going on with that during remote learning. So breakfast and lunch will be served, available at each childcare facility on a pre-order basis provided by our own district food and nutrition services. These will be cold grab-and-go breakfasts and grab-and-go lunches that parents can choose to purchase at full pay, reduced, and will be free to those who qualify. And then snacks will be coordinated by each childcare provider. Just FYI that no hot meals will be prepared at this time by nutritional services across the district, not just at our childcare sites. Providing cold meals will minimize food waste and ensure the meal is maintained at safe temperatures because it'll be handled in our different sites in various ways. And there were also questions about student to adult staff ratio at our last community meeting, and I do have an update on that. Snohomish County requires 1 adult per 9 students. So the adult to student ratio is 1 to 9, and there was questions about that. And more updates to come again on the 31st. So please join us from 6 to 7 p.m. That's it for now, Dr. Valderas.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Their cabinet member want to weigh in terms of some other aspects. I know that we have been working also on quite a bit of communications, and those are again are found on our website. But we have been trying to do a lot of outreach with our community with regards to just essential planning that's going to need to take place. There's a lot of questions from our community that we don't have answers for yet, and they keep morphing because again, it's just it has been a moving target. I think just to recap for the listening audience, it's that we were expecting to go hybrid not that long ago. We quickly shifted to full remote and have been working very hard to start that off. And there's still a lot of procedural questions regarding safety of staff and students, who can be present, who's not. And I know that that's also again we take lead from the health authority, and it's something that we will continue to take lead from the health authority as we continue to again go from open and remote to hybrid to getting back our kids to our brick and mortars like we all want them to be. So I want to ask other staff, Rob, you want to weigh in a little bit on the template in terms of the process for the template?
Yes, again, this is Rob Baumgartner. So the template that you'll see, that will be submitted to OSPI via an electronic form. So we'll move through it. We'll have to upload a series of things. And I want to make sure that you're aware of a couple of things that are not fully complete and give you an understanding of, first of all, what those are and then what our processes look like. The first thing that we have not finalized is our attendance practices. We received word early in the summer that we would get clear direction from OSPI about what attendance would look like, meaning how we were supposed to count for it, what data they would need at the state level, how that might be tied to apportionment, and those kinds of things. We didn't receive particularly tight guidance, but we did receive an emergency order from OSPI that makes clear that we can count all of the asynchronous or independent work time towards our total hours. And so one of the pieces of work that we have done is to make sure that while we have the draft schedules that show a variety of synchronous, asynchronous time, we actually need to produce a schedule that shows, at least for the purposes of a schedule, how all of the assigned work that we give students, in addition to the synchronous in-person learning, will add up to equal a full day. And then, of course, the piece comes about how are we tracking that from an attendance standpoint. And so Greg has checked in with some other districts to get some information about how they're doing attendance. We're working with our Skyward team, who has been amazing, by the way, and are bringing on a new member just now at this crazy time. But hats off to them. Just understanding about how software can be utilized to support our practices. And so where we are is we are looking at how we can use Skyward in the traditional way of tracking attendance, but in ways that's manageable. It can be a little difficult, you know, in a Zoom environment. That's a change for our teachers, something we'll have to think through in terms of how to manage that best. But perhaps more complicated in sort of concept, but maybe simpler in actually how we end up executing it, is how to account for student time when they're not in a live session with their teachers. And so one of the questions in the template asks specifically, how are you going to account for student engagement and attendance on those days when they are fully remote? Now, this is particularly important on Wednesdays, but you'll recall that our hybrid model has students in 3 days of remote learning. And so this is where the guidance from OSPI comes in really handy. So we know that if we give students an assignment for which they are accountable, and we can use that time that they're doing that assignment, and that will count for the full instructional day. If they are given an asynchronous activity, so what we mean here is maybe a recorded video of a teacher lesson. You heard that several times in the comments about the teacher instructional videos. Students watch those and then have a task to do, and they're doing that independently. That can count as well. So when we put all of that together, we will have the full day for our students in terms of meeting the required instructional minutes. And actually what we have has us being, we actually have built in a little bit of a buffer. So we have a little bit of time there. But the key piece is how are we going to account for all of that time and what systems can we put in place? And just as a preview, we know that, for example, some of our technologies like our learning management system, we can check and see if students have logged in. We know that when students use something on the Google platform, they also need to log in. So there are ways that we can use software to check in and see if students have joined the learning, so to speak. And we know that that is not infallible, but it does give us a data point for which we can account attendance. And so that's one of the pieces that we're still chewing on. A second piece that's really important is our grading practices. And we're in the middle of looking at some proposals. Most recently had the Continuous Learning Task Force, kind of the core group weigh in on some draft concepts. And then just today, I met with the students and several of the parents that are on our reopening advisory team, wanting to get that parent and student perspective. But we'll hope to get those finalized and ready to push out by the end of the week. But just as a preview there, we have general consensus that we do need to give grades. We know that there were some things that worked really well in terms of flexibility, in particular, offering the incomplete grade to our secondary students for credit-bearing courses. That was a nice thing. But we also know that we have to have expectations and we have to have a grading system that does all of the things that a grading system can do. So in addition to providing communication to students and families about progress, we know that there are some motivation factors associated with grading too. And we definitely heard from all members of our community, students, families, and definitely our teachers about how engagement, for good, bad, or worse, was closely tied to some of our grading changes that we made. So we're getting close on that, and we'll be taking that back to cabinet and finalizing what gets pushed out there. What you'll see won't be a significant change from what we've done in the past. So just as a preview there. So those are two of the pieces that you'll see in the reopening plan that are incomplete, but they are fully in process. And I hope that we will have those bases tagged very soon.
This is Greg Schwab. I'll go ahead and add some to this. While we are planning for the fully remote opening, we are also planning for when we return to hybrid. We know that we have a lot of work to do in terms of cohorting students. We have a lot of work to do to get our facilities ready. And so this is the work that we're doing right now. Our facilities and operations team is engaging in building tours with administrators to take a look at facilities, look at classroom spaces, so that when we do return in a hybrid model, we'll have the classroom set up. We'll know how we need to arrange classrooms, how we want to have traffic navigate through buildings, and all those things that'll need to be in place so that we can open successfully in a hybrid model. The other thing we're working on is the cohorting of students, because again, we need to make sure that we have roughly even groups of students in the A and the B cohorts, and where we've landed is using the alpha breakdown. So students in alpha last names A through LE will be in the cohort A, and students last names LEA through Z will be in cohort B. We are also working on making sure that those families who have students in the same household with different last names at different grade levels are in the same cohort. So there's a lot of work happening right now just to make sure those cohorts are balanced and that we're really attending to the needs of those families, so that families that have students at different grade levels can be in the same cohort. So those are just some of the things that we're continuing to do to get ready for the eventual hybrid opening when we get there.
Hi, this is Dana Giesland. To add on to what Greg said, also, the students who receive some special programs, that may play a little bit into dividing between the cohorts depending on student needs. And then additionally, I wanted to just speak briefly. We had a special ed community forum last week, and it was fantastic, and we're able to answer a lot of questions because we've gotten quite a bit of guidance actually recently as last Tuesday around special education services. And kind of the mantra is that because we're back, we're not in an emergency setting anymore. This is kind of our new normal, although it is different. Because we're back, our instructional hours were required to hit that average of 1027 and 1,027 instructional hours. And so the same thinking goes in delivering special education services, and specifically minutes on children's IEPs. And so those can be done. There was some legislation passed. So our minutes in general ed and special ed can be served, as Rob said, synchronously or asynchronously. So it could be that an IEP could be delivered, both some in the remote setting, in person, if you will, remotely, and then also with giving minutes that are counted after that synchronous learning ends. And then we're looking to stage some of our students who aren't able to access remote learning well. We're looking to stage in those students, and we have some documents that we've created that help us screen and determine who our most vulnerable learners are and how we get them in, of course, working within Department of Health guidance and labor and industry guidance and all of those pieces. But we know there are students who have a very, very difficult time accessing and making progress towards their goals in their IEPs through remote learning. And those are the students that we will be looking at first to get in our schools and in our settings. So lots of work being done. We had a group that worked and met for hours and hours this summer, thinking of all of these pieces and what we need to do to best meet the needs of, again, those most vulnerable learners. And then in addition, our EL team, our Title I team, our LAP team, looking at how we deliver those services and in the remote setting, and then what that might look like as we come back into the hybrid model.
Are there questions from the board that we can answer?
I have one question for Dana. When you talk about bringing back some of the students into the building, when do you anticipate that would happen? The first week?
No, I anticipate that'll be a staged-in process, working really closely with our student health services and paying attention to Snohomish County rates and how to bring our students back and when we can and at what levels we can bring them back. And then getting our buildings ready. If it's one or two buildings that we first bring kids into, and I'm thinking about our pretty intensive support students who receive intensive support services. So those could be the kids that we stage first so that they can receive some services that are difficult to engage in remotely. Those might be occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language services, those kind of pieces. So I think it would be staged. I think it would be a very small number. And I think it might be just for a few hours at first and then grow that and make sure that we kind of have all of our ducks in a row to get kids back into our schools in person.
Other questions from the board?
This is Ann. Can you remind me again when this needs to be submitted to the state?
I believe it is Thursday, I believe. Yes.
Other questions or comments? Well, thank you again for all the work that you're doing to get us ready to start the new school year. And next, we will move on we will move on to a report on recording board meetings for public record with Chris Bailey and Amanda Ralston.
Right before if I can interject,
Sorry.
No, just real quick. I just want to also just give kudos to our nutrition staff that's fed over 600,000, that provide over 600,000 meals since we've been closed. So 600,000 meals provided to our families. Our technology department that is currently working to deploy 7,000 Chromebooks to our families. And also we are working with trying to purchase additional hotspots and also working with Comcast Essentials to provide families additional resources for connectivity. So I really appreciate all the hard work from all the staff, and also our communications team that is the backbone to all the listening sessions that we're having from Amanda and Harmony, so and all the folks. So I just want to make sure this is a complete team effort, and it's been a heavy lift, and a lot of kudos goes to everybody in the entire district.
Dr. Balderas, I do have a question now. You made me think about it. The partnership that we have with Xfinity Comcast, I had expressed some concerns about some barriers that they typically put up in normal times to families gaining access to internet essentials. Have those barriers been removed?
Can I have Chris Bailey, if he could, maybe weigh in on this? He's the lead on this one.
Certainly. Good evening. My understanding is the barriers that relate to past due accounts are being relaxed during this time period. There is also a barrier that relates to if you were a customer as of recently, they have a rule where you need to not be a customer for a period of time. And I don't believe that one has been relaxed yet. I'll get clarification on that and make sure that it's shared with you guys in a future report.
Thank you. Yes, please keep us informed because that's basic education. I think I speak for all of us, and that would be very important. So continue.
Thank you. Amanda?
And yes, thank you for having us back this evening. My name is Amanda Ralston. I am a coordinator in our communications department, and who you just heard from is Chris Bailey in our technology department. And we've been working on this project about expanding the transparency and reach of these school board meetings here that we're in currently. So I'd like to provide a little background about what we've done over the last few months and where we're headed. In case those of us listening don't know, we're actually recording this meeting. It's going to be recorded live in the cloud, and we will save it and then publish this meeting so that we can all listen in moving forward. If you could turn the slide here. Yes. So we know that we've heard from our community that we need to be recording these meetings. Not everyone is available at this specific time and day to tune in and listen in live to these very essential topics and discussions. And so we want to move forward and have these meetings recorded and shared with our community. But we met on August 11th and had a discussion on this topic. And so we just went through a few considerations and a few options to move forward with. So I just want to give a little review of what we talked about. We could move, yep. So the biggest one is making sure that we're looking at the ADA requirements for website accessibility. They also talk to or speak to live video and also any sort of video that you would post on a website. We also want to think about public records retention, the laws related there, how people are accessing our information, and how we're replying to public records requests. We want to talk about what we're doing now in this pandemic. Here we are all on Zoom in our homes, but we want to talk about too, have a future plan and think about what we want to do for these board meetings as we are able to return for an in-person meeting. And again, another huge consideration is cost. There's fairly large cost discrepancies between any options we'd want to move forward with. So I put together this little chart to look at, again, just breaking down those four things we're considering, under consideration, and also we presented and discussed 3 different options. One is this full service, it checks all the boxes, it does everything we would hope something could do, It merges with our board document system software. It's in full compliance. It's searchable. It's linked in with all of our agenda topics and reports. But it also, for Zoom right now, there is some features, but also gears us up for having new kind of video recording equipment for in future. I put Rev in here. That's just one. In terms of going to that next column, there is an example of a professional transcription or closed captioning provider. But there are a few others we would definitely look at. But this would be something where we would create the video, we would put our videos, recorded videos onto YouTube, but then share our videos with a professional closed captioning service. So they would make sure that we would have captions on all our videos, and not just auto-generated captions, because it will also take into consideration any sort of visual information that is conveyed as part of these meetings. And then again, looking at the cost, there's much less cost for this option, because we're just talking about $1.25 a minute for this closed captioning. And then our third option is the bare minimum. We're still increasing our reach by adding these videos to YouTube. We've heard a lot of requests, just, hey, I just want to see what the discussion was and what was talked about. I'm not available during this time. So even doing this option, we're really increasing those options there, but it could be a starting point for us to ramp up to. And I think as part of this discussion, we want to move into the next slide where we're talking through our recommendations. One thing with this Zoom meeting and also with Zoom meetings, Chris and I, we've been learning a lot about Zoom, and we've have these community forums, and I think each meeting, each forum, we have a debrief and say, whoa, we learned this new thing this time. And so one thing that's come up since we had that board discussion that I want to bring forward as a recommendation is, once we hit go and start these meetings here on Zoom, we want to recommend that we also hit live on our district YouTube channel. What that will do is that it gives our community options for engaging with our board meetings as they're happening. So you could tune in, you could have not everyone's familiar with Zoom, but you could have the Zoom link, we'll still publish those as normal, and log in here. Or you could just simply log in and go to our YouTube channel, which is the same, Edmonds SD every time, and also engage that way. The thing that would make it easier for us in terms of staff time and resource also is by recording a meeting and saving it in Zoom, you have to download it and then upload it. And that takes a little bit of time for processing. But if we go live on YouTube with these meetings, it's automatically captured and recorded and saved on YouTube. And then it's already in process. So in terms of our staff resource time, we're also having a savings. And so that's something we would also like to recommend for step one. So again, today we're recording this meeting. This is really step one, is we're going to put this one up hopefully tomorrow so that we can share it with our community. And then moving into the next board meeting, we would like to recommend to record, but also go live at the same time. And then share that we will have both these options for engaging with these meetings. And also step two, we want to purchase professional closed captions for all these board meetings. It would be an after the fact thing. So we would still go with live and then add these as they come. With YouTube and the auto-generated captions, they take about a day or two to process anyway. So this would be just something we would add to that process and make sure that they're, near 100% accurate as possible. And then three, continue to work on a long-term plan for recording and think about options for recording once we're in person. And then one other things to consider, if you go to the last slide real quick here. Yes, and then I think one thing that we talked about in our board discussion last time was to monitor what kind of engagement we do have in here in Zoom and within YouTube over time, so that we can come back and reconsider and look at if it's worth looking into and ramping up into more of a full service recording model. And then also for these meetings, just to consider as something we've been learning through our community forums, just adding live interpretation in Spanish or American Sign Language. That's something that we had very positive feedback from, also with our community forums. And again, just keep moving forward and learning each time. Are there any questions, comments?
Amanda, this is Nancy Cadams.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for all this work. I know that even before I got on the board, I was wondering why we weren't recording sessions or making them available to people or making it easier for people to see board meetings without having to be there in person. And so I'm really excited about all this work that you've done, and it seems to be something that's feasible and reasonable. And so I just want to say thank you. I know it's a lot of work behind it, and I think it really helps in terms of the transparency and communication to everybody.
Great, yes, thank you.
This is Karen Chase. I just want to echo Nancy's comments, and I really look forward to us being able to have more active participation from our community. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I remember our live stream of our community forum with Dr. Balderas when he came to visit, and how excited we were to have, I don't know, 150 people viewing. Now, you know, clearly we've left that record behind. And so I also am really excited about engaging our community on a more regular basis and providing them options. So thank you for your work.
Great. Well, thank you.
Amanda, this is Gary Noble. If we post the meetings on YouTube, which means they're accessible by anybody, does that eliminate any requirement for us to respond to public records requests, such as give me clips of all discussions on a particular subject? Can you just tell them, well, they're all out there, you go find them yourself?
Yeah, that's kind of, and I think probably Lydia can speak better to this with specific requests and kind of what they look like. But yeah, I think our main thought is that they're open and available and out there to anyone, so that we could, we can rest on that also. That you're always welcome to look through and kind of line them up with what are the topics, what are the recordings, and say, well, this is the topic from this board based on the record about maybe topic-based searches, and then say, well, check, you're welcome to look through any of our videos for our school board meetings based on the topics that we know that were part of an agenda. So yeah, we think it will add to that transparency for people looking for public records.
I was really wondering about the workload on us for finding specific clips for people. Do we still have to do that?
Much less likely. I imagine a public record request would come in, and we would likely provide them the agenda for the board meeting as well as where they could view it.
This is Anne McMurray. So if someone wanted to view one of the, one of the screens or the reopening plan document, they would still need to go to the minutes on the website that prints up all of, in other words, they have to go to the physical board packet to get all of that information. Is that correct?
Right, yeah, that's correct. And with the option we're starting out at, what you're saying is that's the full part of the full service package is you could link the video clips within the agenda. But for now, we're just putting on YouTube. So you would have to kind of reference both at the same time to get an idea of where something might from an agenda be within the video. But you still have to look at the actual, full minutes and agenda for the details there.
And oftentimes when we've looked at security footage that has been requested, our due diligence is to make sure that we're not releasing anything that's confidential that hasn't been requested, which we won't have to do because this is all public record.
If I can just briefly add, as Amanda said, we've learned a lot already. We anticipate we will learn quite a lot more as we roll this out, and we will likely want to be circling back with you all as we prepare for an in-person meeting environment, because there will be certainly some hardware needs in order to make that happen, as well as likely some conversation about what services we might want to employ. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
Ew.
Next, we have a meal price update. Lydia Selly.
So I've attached a really brief description of why we're changing meal prices. I don't know if Sherelle is available to put that up. It's reasonably self-explanatory.
I can pull that up. Give me just a moment, okay?
Okay.
So this is Anne. If I could just ask a question regarding, so we would be charging students for breakfast and lunch based on whether the normal process of whether they're full, reduced, or free, and that would be for the grab and go breakfast and lunches that were referenced earlier. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So currently, if a full price student pays for both breakfast and lunch, there's a different meal price for elementary as opposed to secondary, and that is because of USDA guidelines for calories and components. With a grab and go, we're going to be providing the same grab and go components, whether you're a secondary student or an elementary student. So we're trying to standardize the price because it's the same package. And also this prevents us from having to make change in coins, you know, which is a much more minor consideration, but it's really just to standardize because you're getting the same grab and go components, whether you're an elementary or full secondary. So free students will still receive at a free cost, and we currently a reduced price lunch is 40 cents, and we are investigating if there's any ways that we can alleviate the burden to our reduced price families.
What, I'm sorry, what was the cost for reduced price?
Currently, it's 40 cents per lunch, which would be $2 a week for lunches. Breakfast, the state does provide free breakfast to reduced students in the lower grades, and we're hoping that that gets expanded into the upper grades, and breakfast is 30 cents for a reduced price student.
Thank you.
So Lydia, this is Nancy Cadams. I'm wondering, will this change in price stay even when, hopeful forever, we'll be going back to both, you know, the hybrid and then the, you know, brick and mortar in person, or is this just during the COVID time?
We anticipate it's just during the COVID time, because then we'll have to go back to the USDA requirements, and we can certainly consider it going forward, but so far we only anticipate for grab and go, just to standardize the price to $5 for a breakfast and lunch in the grab and go package.
Anything else? Thank you, Lydia. Next, we have the discussion of the iReady assessment system with Brandon Lagerquist.
Good evening. Is everybody able to hear me okay? All right, good, thank you. My internet has been struggling this evening, so I apologize in advance if I drop off momentarily, but I promise that I have it down to about 25 seconds to where I'm able to get my internet back up and running. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to share more information about the iReady math assessment system. My goals tonight are to describe for you why the Edmonds School District needs an assessment system like iReady, how iReady was selected as the assessment system to implement as a district-wide pilot, and how the system will be paid for. Also, I'm lucky enough to be joined this evening by Tanya King and Nicole Hill. Tanya is a 6th grade teacher at Beverly Elementary, and Nicole is a learning support specialist at Meadowdale Elementary. In a bit, they'll share some of their insights and stories on how the iReady system has had a positive impact. They were both heavily involved in the pilot that we had in the 1920 school year, and were involved in either the math task force or the math assessment steering committee that has been a part of the multi-year process. The slide you see here provides a couple of snapshots of data that highlights why this process was launched in the summer of 2018. So a little more than 2 years ago was when we launched this process. Data like this that shows Edmonds School District to be consistently and persistently underperforming on math state assessments is what led to the call of the creation of the math task force to better understand the district's math achievement and to research interventions and supports to improve math achievement. So the chart there on the left is just a sample of the charts that I share on an annual basis of our Smarter Balanced results, and shows some of the typical results that we've seen in the vast majority of our grade levels. And as a reminder, the other school districts that you see on that chart are comparison school districts that were selected either because they're a similar size as far as total student population as Edmonds, or they have similar demographics as Edmonds, and in some cases, particularly with the Everett school excuse me, with the Everett School District, they match all the criteria where they are almost a mirror image of our school district as far as size and demographics go. The chart on the right highlights how the struggles with math performance on state assessments has been an issue for our school district for quite some time. In the example you see there, the Everett School District has outperformed our school district every year since at least 2007. It may go earlier than 2007, but that's simply where I stopped the analysis. It's important to note that Everett is almost a mirror image again to Edmonds in respects to number of students and demographics such as free and reduced lunch rate, the percentage of students that are enrolled in the free and reduced lunch program. Also note that the time frame spans multiple assessment systems, including the WASL, the measurements of student progress, MSP, and the more recent Smarter Balanced assessments. Next slide, please. Here we can see the membership of the Math Task Force that again was convened in October 2018. The task force uncovered a large variety of data gaps that the district needed to fill in order to support improvement in mathematics. In high school, for example, we've had a program for several years called Intensified Algebra. The research behind the program states that the program is designed for students who are 1 to 3 years behind in mathematics. Currently, we don't have any assessments that provide that specific measurement. In addition, for several years, our middle schools ran intervention and support programs for mathematics. The teachers of these programs expressed the need for data at a diagnostic level of detail in order to better understand students' gaps and strengths, and to be able to measure and monitor progress throughout the school year to ensure that the interventions and supports were having the desired effect of bringing students on a trajectory to be at grade level on their state assessments. Another need to highlight is the high mobility of students that many of our schools experience. A common assessment in math across all of our schools and grade levels assures that students have a core set of data, regardless of which schools in the district that they enrolled in. And that core set of data is easily understood by old teachers and instantly actionable because it's an assessment system that is utilized by old teachers. And so they're instantly familiar with the data, understand how to interpret the information, and have the skill set and the tools to drive that data into action. And for students that enter our schools during the school year, we would have a tool then to be able to quickly find their strengths and gaps, again, at a diagnostic level of detail. Next slide, please. 2 slides ago was a sample of the charts I present each fall, which shows how our school district is performing compared to a sample of others. And so as part of the math task force, we took that same sample of school districts and researched which math assessment systems, if any, that they had in place in their school districts. And so this is the results of that research. As you can see, every school district that have traditionally been using the past few years as the comparison school districts, all of them have an assessment system in math in place, a common assessment that spans most, if not all, grade levels. You can also see that clearly iReady, STAR, and MAP are the popular math assessment systems that are utilized across those comparison school districts. And so in that chart, we can also see that Edmonds is the one school district in that comparison that does not have a common math assessment in place that spans most, if not all, grade levels. Next slide, please. So that finding led the task force to research those popular assessment systems that we noticed the other school districts are utilizing. A primary source of research and data was an analysis by the American Institutes of Research, or AIR. AIR gave iReady the highest possible ratings in all the measured categories, including validity and reliability. Using data like this, the task force decided to pilot iReady and STAR in the 2019-2020 school year. Next slide, please. Thank you. A question that commonly comes up that I want to speak to is the question in regards to why we don't just use the Smarter Balanced interim assessments to fill the gaps identified by the task force. I really do wish that the Smarter Balanced interims could fill more of our needs, but through the work of the task force, we found that they simply cannot meet the needs that were identified for our school district. This table expresses some of the variables that Smarter Balanced interim assessments cannot account for. For example, they do not provide an indicator of 1 to 3 years behind in math. In addition, they do not provide a diagnostic level of detail. Also, the level score data has proven to be problematic. An example is on one geometry interim assessment in high school that we researched. A student only needed to get 1 item correct in order to get a level 2 out of only 3 possible levels that are available on the interim assessments. And so there was concern with that example that the interim assessments aren't fine-tuned enough to really delineate what the strengths and gaps are for each and every student. And finally, systems like iReady also provide online instructional tools. The instructional tools are personalized to each student based on the results of the diagnostic and provide an avenue to support all students with an asynchronous online instructional tool that meets the student where they're at. Next slide, please. And so all that research by the Math Task Force led to the launch of the pilot in August of 2019, starting out with 80 teachers in 25 schools. That quickly grew to 159 teachers as enthusiasm grew and teachers saw what their neighboring teachers were utilizing and got trained on in August. And then in April 2020, we had another opportunity with the school building closures to bring on more teachers onto the iReady assessment system. And so all told, we ended up with 267 teachers across 33 schools that utilized iReady at some point during the 1920 school year. And as you can see, a majority of those teachers were elementary. And all told, we assessed 5,143 students on iReady and STAR, which accounts for almost 25% of our entire student population in the Edmonds School District. And 100% of the teachers who responded to a survey towards the end of the school year indicated that the use of the iReady assessment system was a useful and valuable tool during the school building closures. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce again Tanya King, teacher at Beverly Elementary. She's going to take a moment to discuss in more detail the value and benefit she and her students have seen from using iReady.
Thank you, Brandon. So if you've ever been in my classroom, this will make more sense on why I do things the way I do. Whoever is running the slideshow, when I say click, if you could click, that'd be awesome. So go ahead and click. Brandon asked me to speak to the value of data in the iReady platform. And so he said I had 1 minute to get it across to you, and I tried to find the fastest, simplest way to get my point to you, which is this. Consider these two dartboards. On one side, click, we have student learning without informing data, okay? So we know what the standards are, we know what the skills are, but without current and reliable data, click, we're kind of playing darts in the dark with a blindfold on. Sometimes we hit the target and sometimes we miss the target. Now consider this other dartboard, click, with informing data, meaning using the iReady data and platform. This time, with every lesson, click, with every lesson, every assignment, we hit the mark every single time. And with iReady's learning progression, prerequisite grouping, and teaching tips that's rolling out this fall, click, the entire child becomes, click, a target, and we have student growth. So the whole board becomes just quality learning, and that is what I was able to experience in the 2 years that I've been working with this platform. It's dynamic, it works, it helps with small group instruction, we can monitor student learning and track student growth. And I have learned with iReady in the last few years, click, is that by building a good community in my classroom with really good data, I end up with really strong, tremendous student growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Next slide, please. I have to, oh, there we go, thank you. The iReady system we are seeking to implement as a district-wide pilot this school year is comprised of many components that are detailed on this slide. Everything is set up with the diagnostic assessment, which provides that high-level data and feedback that Tanya was able to speak to. The results provide a personalized online instructional support for all students, whether scoring below grade level, at grade level, or above grade level. Each and every student gets personalized instruction that teachers can also go in and assign or reassign that instruction as well if they notice through other assessments, whether it be informal assessments or other assessments that maybe something was a little bit off the mark. They're able to adjust that as needed. There are also learning games that focus more on the math practices. There are PDF lesson plans that can be used for class activities. And there's also standards mastery assessments, which are short assessments that focus on just a couple of standards as opposed to the more comprehensive diagnostic assessment. And so as Tanya spoke to, there's a wealth of data that comes from the iReady assessment system that really helps to pinpoint and support the student in their continued math learning. The personalized online instruction in particular was an extremely valuable tool during school building closures due to it being personalized to each student, and it has the flexibility that's needed in a fully remote learning environment due to the fact that it's online, can be done asynchronously, and therefore isn't attached to a student having to being in an in-person classroom or in a live Zoom with their teacher. And online instruction also provides another source of tremendous feedback and data for the student, the teachers, and families on how they're improving on their math skills. So a couple schools utilized iReady as an intervention tool in the 2019-20 school year, and Nicole Hill is here to tell you a bit more about that. Nicole is a learning support specialist at Meadowdale Elementary.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to advocate for the iReady math assessment system. I have been a learning support teacher here in the Edmonds schools since 2001. And in the area of reading, for example, at the elementary level, I work in all 3 tiers of support. Tier 3 for our students with special education services, Tier 2 interventions for our students who are falling behind in the area of reading, and Tier 1, co-teaching alongside with our gen ed teachers. And we have assessments for all of those things in literacy. We have summative SBA testing and district assessments. We have formative testing to figure out independent reading levels. We have diagnostic screeners, which allow us to be able to go in and figure out why is a student having difficulty learning to read. And that provides us as teachers just lots of data to inform decisions. It gives us those first line of defense in the general education classroom to really kind of design programs that are designed to kind of boost our students up. For those students who need extra support, we're able to do interventions because we have a system-wide way of assessing our students and knowing what's missing. But in math, I have teachers who are coming to me and saying they are not meeting Common Core standards. They know that they have gaps, but they don't know in what. And year after year, we do Title I and LAP surveys with our parents, and again, they're asking for math help. And we know that many of our students come to us, for example, in 6th grade, functioning really at real skills of a 2nd or a 3rd grader. And we as teachers not only have to teach the core, we have to find a way to remediate all of that. Well, iReady is a system that actually made that very doable for us last year. We at Meadowdale were able to direct some of our federal funding for Title I funds to 3rd grade and 6th grade. And we were allowed to figure that out because of iReady. We knew our neediest grade levels. Furthermore, teachers knew exactly what a given student had gaps in across 4 different domains. And we decided to focus on algebraic principles and base 10 operations. And at Meadowdale, we were able to create a Tier 2 intervention on top of the Tier 1 interventions in math. And we found in just 3 months of those interventions, we were able to increase some students' performance by 3 years. And we were really honored to be able to present that to a February meeting of the Board of Directors. Our students and our families were excited. And then even after the closure, it was the #1 thing that our students continued to do was their iReady lessons. And our teachers felt that they could continue to create energy on the core because they knew that iReady was continuing to address those gaps in our students' mathematics. And it created a common language for us to really kind of discuss the efficacy of our interventions and to be able to intervene in a very systematic way at the Tier 1 level, at the Tier 2 level, and then talk about who needed possible referrals for Tier 3. Honestly, the iReady system was such a positive feedback, and we were a school that did both iReady and STAR. And I cannot support more how having a targeted direction to create interventions for our students, which a math assessment system helps us do, is just essential. Whether it's during remote learning or in-person learning, the need doesn't change. We have had a need for this common-wide math assessment system and a way to be able to be diagnostic and direct in providing our interventions for our students in an individualized way. Thank you so much for letting me advocate for this program. Our teachers love it, our parents love it, and our students loved it. Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, Nicole. And thanks again, Tanya, as well. Truth be told, I accidentally told them that today's meeting started at 6, so they've been hanging in there quite a bit. So thanks again. Next slide, please. Actually, I think you'll need to click twice. One more time. Thank you. So the pilot obviously, oh, sorry, go back one. There we go, thank you. The pilot obviously generated quite a bit of data, being year-long and across a wide variety of schools and teachers. And so we put together a math assessment steering committee this past school year, the 1920 school year, to process through all the data that was collected to develop a recommendation for a district-wide implementation. And so this chart shows who the membership was of that steering committee and some of the sources of data that they used to come to their decision. Next slide, please. The steering committee came to their recommendation in May of 2020 after processing through a variety of feedback data, outcomes data, and after having live presentations done, well, not live, Zoom presentations done by the vendors. Those presentations took place after the school building closures. And so this slide shows some of the data that was used to come to the decision to recommend iReady instead of STAR, which was the other system that was piloted. As we see in these charts, iReady received higher ratings from the community review and higher ratings from the pilot teachers. And the Math Assessment Steering Committee voted to move forward with iReady, with 78.9% of the committee voting for iReady to move forward. And also, it should be mentioned that the elementary and secondary continuous learning 2.0 planning committees that did their work in the month of July also recommended iReady Math to be utilized for all students. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another question that comes up is, how are we going to pay for the assessment system? For the 2020-2021 school year, we'll be utilizing assessment budgets, including some carryover to pay for the professional development cost. The professional development is mostly a one-time cost, as school year 2020-2021 will require training for all teachers. After the 2020-2021 school year, it would only be teachers that are new to the system that would have required training, and we'll have built up more experts within our system regarding iReady to help provide some of that support that's needed, that will be heavily reliant on the vendor for the district-wide pilot this school year. So after this coming school year, the technology levy that passed in February 2020 will pay for the next 4 years of an assessment system like iReady. Funding for the assessment, for an assessment system was one of the items in the tech levy that was promoted in the pamphlets that were utilized to advertise, and in materials available for review on our district webpage as well. One piece that I forgot to mention is that for this coming school year, reserves in the current technology levy is what is planned to be utilized for the math. Next slide, please. Thank you again for taking time this evening to learn more about iReady, why it's needed, and the process that was utilized to get to where we are today. I'm sure you have plenty of questions for Tanya, Nicole, and myself, and so we'll try our best to answer those for you.
Hi, Brandon. This is Nancy. I have a few questions. First of all, I want to really thank you for all the work you've put into this, and all of the teachers and the people on the steering committee who've worked on this. Michael, don't do that now, please. Sorry. Home just at that time. So I'm wondering, first of all, is this being required for all teachers who teach math K-12?
Currently, it's being billed as, I don't know if I can confidently say that it's required for use by all teachers. It's been recommended by the elementary and secondary continuous learning committees for all teachers to use it.
So my concern for thinking about something K-12 is, and I loved Tanya's slides with the targets, but that target only works when the assessment is valid. And for those who are listening, validity just really means is the assessment measuring what it's supposed to measure. So I noticed that the reviews that were done by AIR, the American Institutes for Research, and I highly admire them, were for grades 3 through 8. So I'm going to believe that there's strong technical qualities for grades 3 through 8. There was nothing for K2, where I have a concern, and there was nothing for high school. And so I'm wondering, I have to honestly say, in all of the many years, and for those who don't know me, I've spent my entire career working with assessment and data, that I've really never seen a valid multiple choice test, online or not, for kindergarten, first or second grade. And there's a reason why state assessments start at 3rd grade. I'm particularly concerned when this is done in a remote situation for all grade levels for the validity issue. And I'm wondering how, when a student takes this diagnostic assessment at the beginning of the year and they're doing it at home, how you know that they are the ones doing it and it's not their parents or a sibling who's sitting there next to them doing it.
Yep, there are certainly going to be many challenges that at the beginning of the pilot we weren't anticipating to be a challenge, such as the challenges you presented of trying to administer a diagnostic in a remote setting. And as far as the validity for K through 2, as you stated, K through 2 is, it's well known in the assessment and data world that it is difficult, to say the least, to provide standardized assessments for students who are that young. And so part of the plan for a district-wide pilot for this school year is to do a very thoughtful and detailed evaluation to help assess what the validity and value is, particularly for those earlier grade levels. And Tanya, I believe, actually did remotely administer the diagnostic to some of her students in spring, and so she may be able to speak to how she was able to meet some of those challenges.
Yes, my students took the iReady diagnostic from home. They also took the STAR assessment from home.
What grade level, Tanya? What grade level?
6th grade.
Oh, 6th grade. Okay, thank you.
Yes. I got pretty good data. The data I was expecting to see, the growth I was kind of expecting to see. I didn't really, I had some blow out of the water data, but I was expecting to see that based on the plan before school shut. As far as just simply giving the diagnostic, there's definitely things that I would do different again this year. Not because I was concerned about parents or siblings, but I think parents and siblings, families needed to have better education as to what it was, and I had that as a benefit in the spring. I assigned it as a task last spring for my students to do. They would check in with me, and then I could monitor while they were testing and see how far they were moving and how far they were completing, if there were any yellow caution flags that they're moving too fast, or any red flags that they just clicked. If I were to give this assessment, the diagnostic again this year, it would be as a synchronous lesson. We would all log on together. I also would meet with the parents and talk about the importance of knowing exactly where your child is at this moment and giving them tools and tips on what to say when your child says, I don't get it. It's a diagnostic. So as you know, it's different because half the questions you need to get wrong. So it kind of bumps you around. That's really frustrating for kids. And my kids personally are in the Everett School District. So I got to see on the parent side what it was like to try and administer this at home while teaching. And I badly wanted to help her. And so that kind of planted the seed in my head of, I need to make sure I tell parents going forward, here's how you can help. Why don't we get a drink of water? Why don't we, things we would do in the classroom. But if I have them all on synchronously and we administer it as if it's in class, then I think I can secure valid data because I can see their screen, if you know what I mean. I can see them and anyone around them at the same time.
So thank you. And I can see that working for 6th grade and the intermediate grades for sure. K1, 2 that are going to need an adult sitting next to them no matter what. It's going to be very hard, I think, for them to, for the kids to even go do it on their own. Or
My son was in kindergarten.
Well, that's one data point. I'm talking
To
about
jump in,
many kids.
honestly, I think that Dr. Kadams really brings up a good point. And any time that we assess our youngest students, or even sometimes on the higher end, our high school students, and trying to get them to have valid, there isn't a lot of data on there. However, and especially when you're looking at remote testing, you're thinking about a student's ability to do it. I can tell you our K-2 students needed a lot of support. Their very first time taking it, we literally hand walked small groups of kids through it, and they needed a lot of support in person. But the beauty is that it is low stakes testing for all of those students. This is a diagnostic. It provides us very rich information. And when we know that results are a little skewed or invalid, and there's a mismatch with what we know about a student, it allows us to reset the diagnostic and redo it. It's not a one-time fits all. And for some students in some grade levels, it might be something, especially in that K2, that we decide in teaching and learning that maybe we don't do remotely. But the larger issue for us, whether it's COVID-19 or not, as a school district, to not have some way to screen, diagnose, and create ways to close the gaps in our students is the larger issue we were tasked with before COVID-19. It is not a magic for answering all of our K-2 needs, but it is definitely a valuable resource for us going in our upper grades, and that transition from elementary to middle school and middle school into our algebra classes.
Thanks, Nicole. And I definitely see that. I'm also in terms of thinking about kindergarten. My understanding is that the state is requiring our kindergarten teachers to do walk kids at the beginning of the year. I'm hoping that we'll be able to advocate with the state to at least give them a lot more time for doing it. Walk kids is a developmentally appropriate assessment. It isn't multiple choice, it's observational. It's something that, I've worked with closely, and I've worked with the kindergarten teachers, and I believe in it, but I don't know how a kindergarten teacher could possibly do it within any time frame other than a very long one at the beginning of the year. So for them to have to do that and then be asked also to do this online assessment when they're trying to find very basic precursor math skills. Do the kids have what they need coming into kindergarten? I would definitely advocate for them. And I would say for K2, at least, that it be optional for teachers. I don't know what the kindergarten teachers who piloted, I don't know how many kindergarten teachers piloted it, that wasn't there. But I would just say that for K2, we need to think very carefully and about the purpose of the assessment. So I understand it's diagnostic to see if kids are 1 to 3 years behind, where they're not going to be 1 to 3 years behind in K1 and 2, maybe 2, but some of that I would question. I also wonder about high school. So I'm wondering, and this is probably for Brandon, so is this expected for an algebra teacher? I mean, kids who are even 7th grade algebra, 8th grade geometry, 9th grade algebra 2, those teachers are very focused. They know what they're teaching. do they need a general diagnostic test to see, you know, where their kids are behind? No, they're not behind. Their kids have already shown that they are able to be doing advanced math. I could see it for learning support for high school. I think that could be very beneficial. But to say across the board, go all middle and high school, particularly for the kids who are already in focused algebra and geometry classes, I'm just questioning that and suggesting that the district think about, you know, I see grades 3 through 8, a lot of benefit there, potential benefit. I'm also wondering, I noticed that there are percentile scores, and I'm wondering, what are the percentile scores to be used for?
So first, with the comments about kindergarten, there's actually a state law that other district assessments cannot interfere with the data collection required by WAKIDS. And the state so far has extended the WAKIDS window by 2 weeks. And so the middle of November, yeah, which so kind of coincides with the end of our first quarter on the draft calendar at least. And so our plan for kindergarten would be to not have the first diagnostic until January, so as to be sure to not interfere with WAKIDS and still allow enough time if the state continues to provide a longer window beyond the 2-week extension that they have planned now. As far as utilizing iReady in the upper grade levels, specifically high school, it was in the pilot, that was definitely the more challenging grade levels to get participation from teachers, and we had the least amount of students complete any of the assessments in either iReady or STAR in high school. And so that's definitely a known challenge. And in talking with surrounding school districts, such as Everett, that have utilized iReady for a couple to a few years now, they've acknowledged that challenge as well. And so for this school year, as part of the district-wide pilot, the licenses for high school are being provided to us at no cost, so we can better vet and evaluate if that's something that would have a return on investment in future years.
My guess is high school teachers aren't going to use it if they don't think it meets their needs. And if they don't think it meets their needs, there's no reason for them to spend their time or their kids' time using something when they can find out what they need to know where their kids are on their very focused set of, you know, content. So again, I would see it as an optional kind of thing. So what I see that they're percentile scores. I'm wondering what would they be used for?
We don't have a intentional usage yet for the percentile scores. That'd be something that I want to explore more, talk with other districts like Shoreline and Everett, Vancouver public schools to see what, if any, usage they found for that data point.
I would caution the district about that. Percentiles are useful for ranking kids. They tend to end up in a self-fulfilling prophecy because kids have to be ranked. There are kids at the bottom, even if it means they only missed 1 or 2 items more than the kid next to them. And it tends to be a question of equity as we start thinking about our equity lens. I don't want to see our kids of color or our kids from low-income homes being labeled as low percentage points when that is useless in a standards-based system. So I would really caution, and if it's possible to not have the percentile scores reported, I think it's better than having them be misused, because even when you do a lot of training with folks, teachers can get it, but parents don't necessarily get it, and they see a low percentile score and it's meaningless, particularly if the district has no use for it. I'm wondering, you piloted STAR and iReady. I'm wondering how you chose those 2 and not any others that were being used, could have been used?
STAR and iReady were chosen. A lot of it was based on the research of AIR, and iReady and STAR piqued the interest of the task force because of how heavily that they were being used by by other school districts in the area and the state. And then also what became apparent to the task force was that the additional added value of having some sort of a instructional component to the assessment system, and both iReady and STAR offered instructional support pieces to their system.
What kind of your feedback piece included community? And I'm wondering what kind of community feedback you were able to get and in what context?
Yeah, the community feedback happened in the context of the remote environment that we still find ourselves in. That process was started in, I believe, mid to late April and was open for several weeks. And so what we did was, since we weren't able to obviously have an in-person review with the vendors present, the vendor for STAR, Renaissance, and the vendor for iReady, Curriculum Associates, each created a web page that provided information on their products and offered links and sample questions, so on and so forth. And so that's what the community was able to review as part of that process.
How many community members gave you feedback?
This may not be exact off the top of my head, but it was
just a ballpark.
Ballpark 70 to 100.
Oh, okay, that's great. Because I did notice that in terms of the question about did the teachers, or I don't know, it said community teachers and everything, so I don't know, whatever, but whether or not they recommended the system over STAR, that there were only 19 responses. And so I wondered why there were so few in that. It's in the lower right-hand corner of your of that chart that showed it looked like survey responses. So there were 67 responses to the ones on the top, but on the bottom it said 19 responses, which is very small considering you had over 200 teachers piloting it.
This is Ann. It's page 12, I think, that's being referred.
Thanks, Ann.
I'll need to check into that number to make sure it's accurate. It's almost certainly not an accurate number, the 19. But I'll need to check into that and get the correction to you.
Okay, I'm wondering, of the 5,000 plus kids who took the diagnostic, how many of them also did the instructional piece?
That's another question that I'll need to get back to you to make sure that I give an accurate answer.
Okay, I'm wondering what math adoption Everett uses, and as I think about Everett as a comparison district, we have to remember that their math scores being better than ours, we can't say it's a causal thing from them using iReady, because they've been ahead of us in both in English language arts and math for all those years as well. They have a very strong focus on student learning. They use data on a regular basis. They have data meetings at school level groups. They do many things so that whatever data they get, they are using in a very productive and focused way that I don't see our district currently doing. So if we're going to be spending this kind of money, and it's a lot of money to be spending on one assessment, I realize it's sort of district-wide, but in math, that we need to make sure we have along with it the kinds of conversations and making sure that the kind of information we're getting, we're using well, the teachers are using well, and it's part of school improvement planning and everything else that schools do, because whatever it does is far more than just give that one assessment. I'm sorry I'm taking so much time, but it's a lot of money and it's a lot of teacher time and kid time to be invested. So I really want to make sure that I fully understand this. I know that in a few years, and I don't know how many now, there will be a curriculum adoption in math. And while I see that this is listed as 5 years, I'm a big proponent of curriculum embedded assessments. I think the most useful assessments are assessments that are part of the regular curriculum rather than sitting in a separate kind of system in order to help teachers really integrate what they're doing. So I'm wondering, what is the expectation for when you do a curriculum adoption? If they have an online assessment system, and I would hope that there's a criterion in the adoption process looking for that, would this then be, moved over? And I guess along with that, so I'm asking a long question, what kind of evaluation are you planning to do? Because it looks like you have 5 years of funding, but I would hope that there's an evaluation done. And I'm curious what metrics you're thinking of collecting as part of that evaluation to see, is this working? How is it working? Should it really be continued? What kind of training and supports teachers need to help make it work better? All of those kinds of things.
I'll speak to the piece about the adoption, and I'll ask Brandon to speak to the parts about evaluation. It's an important question, and before I respond, though, I want to talk about the opportunity that we have in front of us, and that's to pilot this product year-long. We feel that we have a need for an assessment tool that's going to give us math information district-wide to identify the gaps that students may have, certainly in any year, but this year more than others, given the nature of instruction in the spring. And it's a bit serendipitous that we were able to secure the funding to do that this year. And our charge that we started with was to find an assessment system, and that's the work that we've been doing. So a lot of the questions, all incredibly important questions we should be considering. I think we have an opportunity in front of us with this being a pilot to make that determination. With regards to our curriculum adoption, this is something that I would expect we're going to be evaluating on a regular and ongoing basis. As you said, it's a lot of money. And if it's no longer meeting the needs that we have, and there's a better alternative, we should definitely consider that. We know that, making those turns in a system our size are not that easy, but it would absolutely need to be something that we would consider as we move forward with math adoption. This year puts a little bit of a wrench in our timeline for some of those things. But at the earliest, we're about 2 years out at secondary math and 3 with elementary, just if we do put a pause on some of that work this year. So, but it's a really important thing that we need to consider as we look to adopt new instructional materials.
Thanks, Rob. One of the things I think is, as y'all think about evaluation, you could probably do it if you haven't already done it, but with those 5,000 plus kids who took it this past year, I'm wondering if you did a correlational study between that and their SBA scores from the previous year to get a sense of the validity of it. And I realize hopefully a lot of it was done with kids like in classrooms, at least some of it was, but that would be at least one kind of validity to, that's a very appropriate kind of comparison validity that you already have the data on for a significant number of kids, at least the kids in grades 4 and up, because grade 3 you wouldn't have had it for, or K1. And I don't want to keep taking everybody's time. I just want to make one last kind of request, because one of the pieces of input we've gotten from teachers in all of these hundreds of emails that we've been getting is a desire for differentiated professional development. And when they know a system already, not being asked to take training again for it, or letting them have a choice whether or not they spend the time to do that. So for all of the teachers, 267 teachers or whatever who've done the iReady, I would hope they wouldn't have to take that again, or if there's something particularly new or different happening this year that's different, just that piece. And I think generally that should be the modus operandi for all the professional development. If they already know Canvas, they shouldn't have to take Canvas, long Canvas training or whatever. That would be pretty easy differentiation, and trusting the teachers to say, I know this, I don't need to spend the time, I can find this, whatever. But I see that certainly applying with the iReady.
Yeah, I think Tanya has a comment.
I'm going into my 3rd year with iReady, and Beverly is going into their 2nd year, and I've spoken with Curriculum Associates. They have a plan for a 2nd level, 2nd year training, which is more focused on diving into your data, forming those instructional groups, and conducting data chats with students so they become more in charge of it. During the 1st year, it's a lot about learning how to use the program, but that's with any new piece of technology that we're taking on. And iReady acknowledges that. So I've already reached out to them, so I know they have a plan for that, so we're not doing the same training again.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much.
Yep, and to speak to the evaluation questions a little bit more, you mentioned doing the correlation analysis of iReady and STAR scores to the previous Smarter Balance, because we of course don't have 2020 Smarter Balance, unfortunately. And so we did do that correlation analysis just with the fall and winter diagnostics, ignoring for now at least what was done remotely in spring. And the correlations for iReady were higher across all grade spans compared to STAR. And unfortunately, I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but they were generally, I believe, in the 0.8s for iReady, with the correlation with Smarter Balance again from the previous year. And that's another reason why we want to do this as a district-wide pilot for this coming school year, is that since we missed out on that 2020 Smarter Balanced data point, we missed out on an extremely valuable piece of evaluation data to be able to ascertain how well of a predictor that the diagnostic can be for understanding which students are on a trajectory to be at grade level by the end of the year. And I also just want to clarify that I hope that to state that the results at school districts like Everett were due already. As you stated, we have no way of knowing really what iReady contributes towards achievement in Everett or not. And it was really just to paint a picture of what the other school districts around us are utilizing that we may benefit from.
I have one quick funding question. If you can find out like how many K-2 teachers and or high school teachers are going to choose not to use it, would that lower the cost of it?
Well, I understand the recommendation, but our plan at this stage would be to move forward with our original plan to have all of our K-2 teachers do this. And we're not talking about all of our high school students. We had talked about our 9th and 10th grade students. So that's,
so Rob, you're
just want to
saying
make sure
9th and 10th grade students who are taking algebra and geometry?
Well, as you said, we are able to get that at the same rate. So there's not a savings there. That's correct for high school. And we still have to figure out who at our high schools would actually take the assessment.
One of the, we have had strong interest with our 9th grade teachers to have a common assessment for at least a couple of reasons. One reason is that 9th grade is, of course, the grade level where there are no state assessments. And so having a common data point in math to help inform, potentially help inform courses for 10th grade and or to help inform who's on a trajectory to succeed on the 10th grade high school level smarter balanced assessments. And also 9th grade is where we have our intensified algebra program, where the program is designed for students that are 1 to 3 years behind in math, but we still don't have that tool that actually measures years behind. And so one of the things that we'll be evaluating with iReady is to establish how effective of a tool that it could be to more appropriately assign students to that program.
Also, Anne, I can interject as well. I know I've only been here a short time, but one of the goals is to really look at our assessment system as a whole, K-12, to really look at what do we want to do in Edmond School District to really go back to what we were before and really use data effectively to help inform at that teacher level, that ground level where it makes a difference. And the goal is to frame up our strategic plan, create our instructional framework with the MTSS backbone, and really look at how do we do this effectively as a system. And that's part of our strategic planning process that I know that's been started, that we will complete. And I'm going to have the instructional leadership team work with our staffs at the building levels to really develop a comprehensive assessment system that that makes a difference for kids, to help, again, base level, to help inform instruction at that classroom level. And I know that we had data teams, professional learning communities, whatever you call it. You look at data effectively to help engage kids and look for either interventions or extensions, and we're going to continue to do that. So this is just one area that we're going to look at, but it's going to be very comprehensive. And the goal is to really work with our entire teaching community to make sure that we're meeting the needs of kids. Again, I'll take this. If I can get kids to math and reading proficiency by the end of 3rd grade summer and work hard to keep them there by using data to help inform, that is the secret sauce for engagement, to have kids be successful in high school.
This is Anne McMurray. I had a question, Brandon, regarding, you said 245 elementary teachers were kind of got on board during the 1920 school year. What for those 245 elementary teachers, what percentage of our elementary schools did those 245 teachers represent? And what percentage of our elementary teachers did those 245 teachers represent?
Well, we have approximately 75 classroom teachers per elementary grade level. And so that accounts for approximately 3 total grade levels out of the elementary, a little more than 3 grade levels worth. And by the end of the school year, every elementary school had at least 1 teacher that was utilizing iReady.
Okay, so, and Rob, you mentioned that in the 1920 school year, that it was recommended, not required. Would it be recommended and not required for the 2021 school year?
If that's what I said, I misspoke. In 1920, it was a pilot process. And when we offered it more widely, it was at the time of the school closure, recognizing that Curriculum Associates was going to make the tool available. This was the direction the pilot and review teams were going anyway. And so we made that available to teachers that wanted to use it. Recognizing that we were in a remote environment, it wasn't the time to mandate that. And so for next year, the school year starting now, is when we would expect all teachers to use it.
I guess I have a question about that, just because asking teachers when they're already trying to put together online learning and all these other new things that they're basically having to reinvent the wheel of how they provide instruction. I'm really concerned about adding a requirement for so many of our teachers and our students to have to learn one other thing, one other program, one other app. And that's why I'm wondering, is there a way for us to continue to offer it as a resource, but not as a requirement, and allow teachers within their same grade levels or within their building to determine if they feel like they're ready and able, and their students are ready and able to go ahead and take something like this on. I absolutely recognize that this has been an issue for over a decade. My concern is that we're in the midst of an unprecedented shift in how we're providing education. I'm concerned about asking teachers and students to take on something new at this time when there's so many other things they're being asked to take on.
So I'm going to ask Tanya or Nicole to speak to the piece about taking it on and what it actually means in terms of implementing it this time. But I'm going to answer your question in a different way. This is what drives me at this stage in our system, with limitations that people on this have already mentioned. We do not have a universal tier 2 intervention in mathematics. We don't have one, all right? That falls on the backs of our classroom teachers to provide that differentiated instruction for their students. The assessment tool is only one component of this product. The other piece is the online instructional tool. When I talk to other districts about things that are working in their system, that is something that they highlight. That is something that we piloted. We wanted to answer the question, does this provide that level of support? The plan got a little messed up because we don't have the SBA data. We couldn't answer the question about those students that use the online instructional component. Was it predictive? Did it improve in the ways that we wanted? But when we get back to my opening point, which is we do not have a tier 2 intervention, we need one. And this would provide, I'm not saying it replaces the high quality instruction a teacher can provide, but it can certainly supplement in significant ways if we're able to do a online instruction component that is designed for their level that can support those students. And given the environment that we're in, where students are going to be at home, this is an important component. And yes, there will be a little bit of a ramp up. There's training and there are pieces that it will take to implement, but I think the benefits to our system, and attached to what Dr. Balderas said already about a comprehensive assessment piece, those are things that I don't think that we can just wait at this time. And so, but in terms of what it's going to mean for our teachers, I have to defer to the teachers that joined us today to talk about how doable it is in the environment that we're expecting.
I was blessed to be able to work with all grade levels in the implementation of this, including the expanded use of it during our closure. And the overwhelming feedback is that the teachers did not enjoy the process of the assessment part itself, especially in the younger grades. But once they got through that data, they found it immensely helpful to look across 4 domains. Dr. Kadams was mentioning, well, would we still give it at high school if they're doing well in algebra and geometry? But one of the pieces that we found is there was often students who were high-level students that had gaps in surprising things like data and measurement. And you could see those gaps coming out in their problem solving, especially when they were looking at statistics. And so overwhelmingly, what we found from our teachers and the feedback that we got is that it actually saved them time. Yes, there was training involved, but the day-to-day planning that us teachers do to try to teach to the core, and then we have 6 or 7 little invitational groups we're trying to fill in all of those gaps and always dropping a ball on one domain or another. What this allowed us to do is to be able to set forth kids and to have them working 3 times a week for an hour, a half hour at a time. So a total of an hour and a half a week working on those foundational skills. And it allowed us to direct all of our time to make videos on Common Core content so that we weren't having to do a lot of that remediation piece. So in the end, we found iReady actually saved us time in all of our planning rather than adding extra time. And it became an overwhelming best trend, even from our most vocal teachers who were against that adoption in the beginning. Can't imagine how a kindergartner or a first grader could actually access this diagnostic. Found it was actually engaging. The students didn't feel like they were being tested. There were brain breaks built in. It was developmentally appropriate, and it actually saved them time rather than cost them time.
Well, I guess I'll start. Can I go back for a second and talk about the percentiles? The reports that we use have family reports. They don't say percentiles on them. So I just wanted to speak to that as far as, because that freaks parents out. Who are we kidding? But it simply said at grade level, above, or meeting, or just below. As far as the training goes, as I'm listening to all of you talk, what I'm hearing you say is that we need to be more of a data-driven school district. We need to have good data, and we need to use that data to drive our instruction so that we can close our achievement gaps. The training is not only how to use iReady, but it is also how to look at data. It's how to evaluate your data and form groups. It's how to then take that small group, teach a mini targeted lesson, and then evaluate, do your students understand? And then you move to the next thing. I saw kids jump years because I knew those gaps and those holes and what they were looking for. And when I was able to kind of put putty and fill in those gaps, everything else just picked up. My students became data driven. It wasn't just me saying data, data, data. I had a student email me after taking the diagnostic at home in the spring to celebrate her score because she understood what it meant. It meant that she was going to go in as an EL student into middle school at grade level. Whereas at the beginning of the year, she cried when she saw her data because she came in at about second and third grade. So the teachers at Beverly showed up over the summer with no pay and clock hours to do a training because we knew this was training we needed. We knew iReady would provide us with things that we needed. So I believe going into a pandemic, if it is presented as one more thing that teachers have to do, absolutely not. Nobody wants to do it. That's why Amplify got pushed off until the October, November-ish, because that's not present. That's not going to help me right now. But knowing what did my kids lose over the summer, what are they walking in being able to do, that is something that's going to help me, and that's training I can get behind. And iReady does a nice job. They don't overwhelm the teachers in the beginning. They teach you how to use the program. Why? Because in the beginning, you don't need to know anything else. After you learn how to use the program, they come back and say, let's look at your data. This is the reports you have access to. This is how you can use your reports. Talk to your teammates. Talk to your grade levels. Here are the tools that we are providing you to help you do a better job of doing this. Now plan. Take time. Because it does take time to start becoming data-driven. It doesn't happen overnight. And one magic test or program is not going to make that happen. But if we were to start now during the pandemic, In 3 years, 5 years, when we do the curriculum adoption, we might actually get something that seems to fit a little better to what we actually need. So, sorry, I got on my soapbox there.
Thank you so much for your testimony. It sounds like an exciting program for you.
I believe in this. I've used this for 2 years and it is powerful. My classroom dynamics have changed. My students run their conferences. They talk to their parents about their data. They explain what they need to do and they do their work because they know what the end result is, what they want. So it's easy to get behind this one. And I've looked at a lot of different programs like Brandon, trying to find the magic bean that's going to grow this great beanstalk. The thing I think I love the most is that they will tell you themselves that it takes a teacher to make them work. They're just a diagnostic and a tool. But to have a tool that helps me do my job better, especially during a pandemic, like, because let's be real here. I have kids I've never met walking in, I don't know what they know. And to have something that can give me much better direction and information is powerful. So yes, I do get excited about it. Also, I'm frightened that because of the initial cost, that this board is going to vote no. I'll be honest with you. I'm fearful of that because then I will start the school year not knowing where to begin. And to give you an idea, I had 25 students in my classroom. 13 of them came in 2+ years below grade level. Now, if all I knew was 2 years plus below grade level, I don't even know where to begin with that. And I don't even know where to group them. But because I had a diagnostic that pinpointed that these 5 needed phonics, these 3 needed vocabulary, these 2, it was all about the nonfiction. Then I can make a plan for every single kid. And so the kids in my class had individualized learning plans and they grew and they celebrated. And it was good. I felt good. They felt good. But now I have to get off my soapbox.
Well, and I think that the board actually got to meet some students who were involved in an iReady intervention in February. Many of you guys were seated when my 3rd and 6th graders came and spoke with their passion about their progress. And everything that Tanya is saying about the students being informed about their own gaps, but more importantly, empowered that with specific focus, they could do something about it and they could see and feel that difference for themselves and own their own data. As they presented to you in March and they all held up their progress, they knew what it meant. It wasn't just, I jumped up this much, it's what it took to get them there. And I didn't use the iReady lessons. So I used simply the data from the assessment system and we did teacher interventions. And so, and that was to stay true to our pilot that we had agreed to. So the assessment system in and of itself identifies what you need to do. And the power of the iReady lessons is that they are well-developed video lessons that best practice is telling us that students respond to and could be accessed at any time. And that's the beauty. The iReady can be logged on at any time for them. So the students themselves feel that difference. And you heard from many of them in February before all this happened.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you on behalf of the board. Thank you so much for your work and for your enthusiasm for this project and for coming here tonight a half an hour early.
Oops.
And spending time with us. Let me find my agenda again. Okay, well, next we have one bit of new business. It's a single reading to approve Resolution 20-27 Edmond School District Reopening Plan. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we pass that resolution.
Ms. Gary Noble, I second it.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 20-27, the Edmond School District Reopening Plan. a resolution on the reopening plan. Is there any discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you. I know that some of the, in the full reopening plan, there are a few things that are still being settled. Are we, by adopting this resolution, with the understanding that there are still a few things that need to be tied up in the reopening plan? How is that accounted for if we adopt the resolution? I'm in support of adopting the resolution. I just understand our reopening plan still has a few things to be finished up.
I can speak to that a little bit, and there will be flexibility through OSPI because we know that this will morph even throughout the year possibly. So I know that we were on an OSPI call today and that was referenced.
Thank
So
you.
I have a quick question. My understanding is that plan is supposed to be sent to OSPI 2 weeks before school starts. And by my calendar, that would be tomorrow, Wednesday. It's 2 weeks before September 9th. And I could be figuring that wrong, but just questioning to make sure we have that right.
Yeah, so we plan to submit as quickly as the board, if the board approves it tonight, we'll submit it tomorrow. And we know full well that there'll be adjustments made throughout the year on the plan. And it'll be a back and forth with OSPI. I know that that was, again, something that we fully intend to be able to submit tomorrow if possible. Knowing for whether we still have some missing pieces or some holes or some vagueness in it, but that we'll continue to again, re-inform the plan and submit and resubmit.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. I'd like to ask for a roll call vote, please.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye. And the motion passes, the resolution passes. Thank you all. And finally, we have board comments for those who didn't have an opportunity earlier. And I would just, I'll mix it up a little. Director McMurray, would you like to make a few comments in closing?
Sure, I'll just say briefly, given the time that we're at, I just want to thank all of those who gave information on reports and presentations today, all those who took the time to add their comments to the public comment section, and the high number of people, especially at the beginning of the meeting, who had logged in and were watching. In almost 30 years being involved in the school district, I've never seen such high levels of participation. So I just want to say thank you to those who are finding time out of their schedules to just keep track of what's going on in the district, and just say thank you.
Thank you. Director Chase.
Thank you, President Kilgore. Echoing the appreciation of all the input that we're having and the thoughtful comments of our community members. I also want to mention that the work moves forward with WASDA. The General Assembly is coming up, and recently the many of the district caucuses met. I attended the large district caucus where we discussed some of the resolutions and amendments that we'll be voting on in September. However, there are a large number of them, and I did not review all of them. So tomorrow, District Area 1 is hosting a meeting by the Resolution and Legislative Committee that will be attending, and invite all of you to attend if you so desire, where we will be discussing some of the legislative positions and the amendments and the concerns of all the school districts around the state. And so I look forward to being able to provide more information and any recommendations on amendments that may impact our district that we would like to put forward.
Thank you. Director Noble?
Really, I agree with what everybody else has said. I really appreciate the participation, all the letters we've received, all the comments we received for this meeting. And at one point, we had well over 900 people logged into the meeting, which is, as Ann said, totally incredible. We've never had this interest, and I think it's a really great system that allows people to understand what's going on. And I just want to thank the administration. This has been an incredible push to get the schools open. We still have 2 weeks to go, but it just was an incredible turnaround to try to come up with a learning plan that was robust, had accountability, and hopefully will be so much better for our students than the plan we had this spring. So thank you to everybody involved.
I'm blanking. Director Kadams? I forgot.
Thanks, Deborah.
I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you, President Kilgore, for all your hard work. I echo what everybody has said. This is a really difficult time for everybody, and everybody is working hard. Everybody is stressed. It is wonderful how much involvement and caring there is from administration, from teachers, from all levels of staff, from the community, from students, from families. And I just think it's really important right now that we give everybody grace and presume positive intent for everything that's going on, that we need to really work together as a team to try to deal with the challenges that we have and meet our kids' needs as best as we can in this environment. And so I just thank everybody for all the hard work, because everybody is working very hard, and it's highly appreciated.
Thank you. And finally, I'd like to give Dr. Balderas, who is here, this is almost 2 months, give you an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, as stated before, we're still working towards a resolution with our Teachers Association on working conditions. And it's been just a really difficult 6 months for everyone, not just here in Edmonds, but across Washington, but across the country, and actually internationally. This has just been a really difficult few months across the entire country and internationally. Again, this summer, like I said earlier as well, we began thinking we'd begin with a hybrid model. We quickly morphed to this fully remote option that heard today that 90% of all students in Washington State will be in. So 90% of all kids in Washington State will be in a fully remote option this to begin the school year. Again, as we begin the school year, also we understand there'll be difficulties and hardships for all. And I was on a meeting last night with families and community members and students. Some of those some of the remarks are really kind of break your heart in terms of the pressure that's going on at home in terms of access, opportunity, and there are a lot of issues that out there as we fully begin with a full remote option. And we hope to mitigate as many as we can, but we know that there will be issues from connectivity to childcare to working parents that have to take time off, and also some of our teaching staff as well, some of our admin staff included. We hope to open up our schools as soon as possible, as soon as it's safe to do so, again, following the guidance from our health authority. And again, we appreciate the patience, we appreciate the staff work. As mentioned earlier, it's been a heavy lift by a whole lot of people. And really thank you to all the staff in the Edmonds School District. As I've been here almost 2 months, is understand the hard work that everyone has put forward and putting their best foot forward to reopening schools. And I appreciate the board support and acknowledgement of that, because again, we will get through to beginning of the school year and do the best we can, but we understand that we, as stated earlier as well, that we're going to ask for grace, for patience as we continue to get through this, as we hope to open up our schools this year as soon as we can, as soon as it's possible for our faculty and our students to be safe to do so. And we'll continue, even when we begin with the full remote, we will still be meeting in terms of working on a hybrid and working on reopening plans. So the work does not stop. It's we're going to continue to work as we continue to morph throughout the year, working in our teams. And that's something that is not forgotten in terms of the workload on staff. And again, but appreciate everybody's acknowledgement of that, and appreciate all the work that's gone towards, again, all the different plans, the 21 different work groups that helped inform the scheduling and everything that we're doing, from anywhere from student transportation pickups to the AABB schedules and hybrid to our phenomenal student services team with our health services office, just Mara, our lead nurse, taking just a huge chunk of time and taking lead with a group of people to create a safety plan that is remarkable, that's been shared widely across the state of Washington. So again, I can't give enough kudos, because I'm just humbled by the people that we have. So thank you.
And I don't believe we have a discussion topic. So if there's nothing further, meeting adjourned.